basically just helps make you sweat as if you're exercising.
Achieved some remarkable things with going to space, fighter pilot. If we sort of go back, like doing a bit of research on your backstory, as a kid you talked about having motion sickness, fear of heights. How do you go from that to becoming a fighter pilot?
That's a great question. You know, as a kid I was extremely competitive. I had to be first in everything I did. You know, with a little bit of guidance and mentoring from my teachers and my parents, I kind of harnessed that energy into sports. And so running became a passion of mine. I was not a good student, terrible student, C's and D's throughout grade school, high school. But I saw all my friends applying for colleges, so I'm like, hey, I want to do that. But I didn't have the grades, but I'm like, okay, what can I do? I can run. All right, so I focused on running. Ended up winning the state championship race my junior in high school, which actually got me recruited to run in college. So that was kind of my ticket into higher education. And then I got to college, ran, still struggling with academics. So I got involved in a program called outdoor education. It's more or less experiential learning, a little bit different from traditional way of academics. Scuba diving, rock climbing, winter mountaineering, whitewater rafting. So that was kind of my niche to get through college. But while I was at the university, I was introduced to the ROTC program. It's a military way of becoming an officer in the Air Force. They were encouraging students to sign up and come fly in a KC-135, big refueling aircraft, locally based where I was at. So I signed up. You know, I was a product of the 80s. Top Gun came out. I was inspired. So I'm like, hey, I can do this. Most miserable experience of my life. Threw up for 2 hours straight. But I had the chance to go in the back of the aircraft and watch fighter jets rejoin and get refueled. And that was the spark I needed. So I set my goal and become a fighter pilot, graduated, and then was lucky enough to get a pilot slot and spent 20 years flying the F-16.
Yeah.
I flew for the Air Force Thunderbirds demonstration team, fighter weapons school, which is like the Top Gun version of the Air Force, a little bit better than the Navy. And then, you know, so that became my life, my career for 20 years before I got introduced to space exploration.
Fantastic. And how do you prepare? It's a pretty high pressure environment. How do you sort of prepare yourself for those conditions, flying jets and Thunderbirds and that?
You know, it's physically as well as mentally demanding, and it takes a lot of preparation. The environment that you're operating in is very high intense G-forces. Yeah. So gravitational force, almost like a roller coaster that you experience, but a little more intense when you're flying an F-16. Can pull about 9 Gs. So if you weigh, with all your gear, about 200 pounds, 9 times that, you're close to 2,000 pounds of force that's being applied to your body. So it's extremely challenging. It requires you to be physically fit. So with a running background in college, I was a swimmer lifeguard in Cape Cod, Massachusetts as a kid. It was only natural for me to kind of transition into triathlon pretty early on. Okay. And I realized that helped me stay fit for flying fighter jets. Yeah. So I kind of had this parallel paths in my life of in my free time, I'm going to continue to do endurance sports, but all the while that's a benefit for my day job of flying fighters.
How much training were you able to put into triathlon at that stage as well? Because I imagine the job is like pretty full on. Yeah.
The job is very demanding. Just being in the military, being deployed, Afghanistan, Iraq, all over the Southwest Asia and Southeast Asia. You adapt, you overcome the challenges. For me, I would travel with my bike. So whether it was on the Thunderbirds, I'd load it into a bike case and build it and break it down each trip, or deployment, I'd set up a trainer inside the compound. You just get it done. Commuting, became the bike. Yeah. You take your lunch break would be the swim. You'd eat either on the way to the jet or in the jet before you start the engine. So you just figure out how to get it done if you're truly passionate about it, which I was. So.
And I was listening to a podcast and you were talking about using visualization to help prepare for flights and that. Is that something that you use that transfers over into triathlon as well to help you prepare for races?
I think there's a lot of parallels and consistencies between the two worlds. And visualization is definitely one of them. In the Thunderbirds, that was, it takes a lot of effort, energy, and time and resources to be able to actually fly. So to supplement that type of training, we do visualizations. It's rehearsals. We go through the communications, what we say on the radio, and we visualize the maneuver itself, what I'm doing with the stick and throttle and the pedals.
Yeah.
And what references I'm looking at, and it hones those skills over time in your brain. And it's the same for triathlon. If I'm thinking about my swim stroke, my pedal stroke, the cadences, all the things that need to come together come race day for successful competition.
And what sort of speeds would you get up to in a
So a fighter jet, it's capable of 2.05 Mach. So let me interpret that. Mach is around 750 miles an hour. So 2 times that, so 1,500 miles an hour. People ask, what does that feel like? Well, up there where you're doing these types of speeds, it's hard to really tell. It's when you're really close to the ground, which we were for the Thunderbirds doing demonstrations. But that's nothing compared to spaceflight, where you're going 17,500 miles an hour. So Mach 2 to now you're going Mach 25.
Yeah. Does reaching those sort of speeds put descending here in Nice, descending the bike course into perspective a little bit?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that. I mean, I love that. So I was very fortunate to be stationed in Italy.
Yeah.
So there's a base called Aviano Air Base. It's just at the southern portions of the Dolomites, just about an hour north of Venice. Spent 6 years there with the family, very rural area, and commuting to work would be through the Dolomites. Where the Giro Tour or where the some of the stages where I'd climb some passes for a couple hours, and then eventually I'd make my way down to base where I'd go fly.
Excellent. So were you and your wife together from the very beginning of you becoming a pilot, or did you meet later on? Just thinking how you sort of fit in family life with flying and with training for IRONMAN.
So one of my first assignments was Osan Air Base in Korea, and I met my wife Kristen, who was a sister of another guy in the squadron.
Oh, okay.
So she came out to visit. We hit it off and got married shortly after that, and so that was back 25 years ago. This weekend actually is our anniversary.
Wow. Oh, perfect.
And so we have 3 kids, all teenagers, and it's truly a balance. Anything in life, you say in moderation, but I would definitely not call this moderation. But you need to find balance. And for me, it's making sure the family is always priority. And then whatever I can fit in, on a selfish endeavor, Ironman, I'll get it done because I want to. It's a passion of mine, and I'm driven to want to succeed. I feel that true spiritual growth happens when you push your limits. You don't necessarily need to harness your strengths. Sometimes it's taking an honest look at your weaknesses. Courage the definition of courage is not the absence of fear and failure. It's how you face those fears and failures to overcome those challenges that you have. And for me, flying, it was motion sickness, scared of heights, terrible grades, but I didn't shy away from those. I faced them head on, and that's the same way with, trying to figure out how you're going to train with a family, 3 kids, and a full-time job. You face those challenges, and you figure out ways to adapt and overcome.
And you talked about pushing your limits there. How did the space travel and space exploration come about?
So, big part of my growth throughout my career has been just human connection, interacting and meeting people. And gentleman I met back when I was on the Thunderbirds, Jared Isaacman, I befriended, and long story short, once I retired in 2016 from the military, we started working together in a company called Drock International, providing adversary support. So more or less the bad guys, helping government militaries train. So we did that for a while, and that led to some conversations with SpaceX about how we can support and get involved in space exploration. And so those conversations led to The first project we were involved with called Inspiration 4. There's a Netflix documentary called Countdown about it, but it was the first all-civilian mission to space.
Yeah.
I unfortunately did not go on that mission. I was the mission director on the ground.
Yeah.
So I was in charge of the logistics, the coordination, the training, the documentary, the fundraising, because we ended up raising $250 million to support of St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. But very successful mission, 3 days in space. That led to, okay, what's the next step? For us, it was about a developmental program. We wanted to help SpaceX make this transition from one rocket they're flying, the Falcon 9 with the Dragon capsule, to the next generation rocket, which is Starship. So we were empowered to help solve some of those big challenges. Very similar to what NASA did with Project Gemini of bridging the gap from initial space flight to going to the moon. In a similar fashion, what does SpaceX have to solve for us collectively to get back to the lunar surface and eventually Mars and beyond? And so our first project of this developmental program was Polaris Dawn, where we accomplished the first commercial spacewalk. We set an altitude record for Earth orbit. We tested laser communication for the first time. And then we did a bunch of science and research, all focused on helping solve some big challenges physically with the body when we talk about these long duration missions in the future.
Amazing. And we were saying just before we started recording, like 1 year ago today, you were up in space. Is that...
Yeah, well, I was orbiting Earth a year ago today. This is day 3 of our mission, I think. You're going around the Earth. Our orbit was highly elliptical, meaning the furthest we get away, it's called the apogee, was 1,400 kilometers. And the closest, the perigee on the backside of that orbit was 190 kilometers. So it's just this very highly elliptical. So we got to see the perspective of Earth from different viewpoints, which was absolutely amazing and mesmerizing. You're traveling 17,500 miles an hour, and you're going around the Earth every 90 minutes. So you're seeing all this evolution of light, sunrises, sunsets, and it's just, you're focused. You got all this work to do, but all you want to do is look outside and absorb all these. It's truly this like transcendence of your senses.
Yeah.
You know, it's light, it's Earth, but it's a different type of illumination. It's like, because you're seeing it from a different perspective. We're used to looking up and it's filtered. You know, there's a lot of gases this light is coming through. Versus up there, you're looking down and it's constantly changing. Amazing. So it's definitely an amazing experience.
Fantastic. And so, 12 months on, it's Spaceman to IRONMAN. this
I like that, Spaceman IRONMAN. Yeah.
And so, how does the training for space compare? Well, what does that involve, and how does that compare to training for an IRONMAN?
The training for space is very similar. You know, for the 3 years that we were getting ready for our space mission, there's more or less 3 categories of training. There's the procedural training, simulators, spending a lot of time going through the procedures, the emergency procedures, the nominal stuff. And then there's the physiological training, getting the body ready for space. Because that transition, that adaptation that you experience at zero gravity is like no other. So you got to get ready doing the centrifuge, going around, G-forces on the way up and the way down, the altitude chamber, the vacuum chamber, all these things to get the body ready. And then there's the experiential training. That's about getting comfortable in uncomfortable scenarios. And I talk a lot about mountaineering. We climbed several mountains, and that experience is very similar, parallel to spaceflight, where you know, you might be 3 or 4 days into a summit climb. On Cotopaxi is where we went for one of our climbs. You're dehydrated, you're hungry, you're sleep deprived. You're dealing with altitude changes and the conditions, cold. You're in confined spaces inside of a tent. All very similar to what you experience physiologically in space. You're in a confined capsule. You're dealing with pressure changes. You're sleep deprived. You're hungry. All these things are very similar. So that is a good representation of the 2 worlds, and that helps you become comfortable, because you can't just simply come down from space. Like, you just can't come down from the mountain. that's, there's a lot of consistencies training for an Ironman where you got to get that 5, 6, 7 hour ride in. You can't just blow it off. It's all part of the experience of trying to get comfortable in these uncomfortable scenarios, especially in game. That's why all the elements you got to look and visualize and think about and adapt to. Nutrition is a big part of that. It's just, it's, if you're terrible 4 hours into the bike, it's not over. So you got to learn and adapt.
Were you still training for Ironman during the course of your...
That's funny that you ask. Yeah, actually I was. Our mission got delayed several years in the process, just based on the fact that we were developing a brand new spacesuit.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the long pole in the tent to get us to launch. In the process, I took a 10-year hiatus for work from Ironman. Yeah. I'd done 15 prior to 2000. I believe it was 2020. And I wanted to get back in, but I was in the middle of this training for space. I'm like, okay, I'll throw out, let me do Ironman Lake Placid in 2 years. We got to that point, well, our launch was scheduled right around there. I'm like, all right, so I'll punt Lake Placid to the next year. But we got delayed again. So I'm like, all right, maybe this is the year. So I kept on training. Well, that got delayed again, and I had to punt Lake Placid. I eventually signed up for Ironman Chattanooga in Tennessee. And so I was training, and now the launch date is getting pretty close. We're within about 2 weeks of Ironman Chattanooga. I'm like, I think I can do it. We were in quarantine. I'm doing 6-hour rides on Swift in the house. Pools of sweat, and my crew members are like, what are you doing? So I got it done, and we splashed down. 10 days later, I go to Ironman Chattanooga, try to compete there. It was challenging because of that adaptation that your body goes through. It's not easy when you're at zero gravity, come back to Earth, and you got to get reacquainted with that 1G force. Yeah. Your legs feel like lead, nonetheless. Unbelievable.
And you mentioned about hydration earlier, and dehydration is obviously a big consideration when you're up in space. How did you overcome that?
In space, it's not easy. Nothing is easy in space. I mean, anything, this cup sitting here would be floating around. The liquid inside would be floating around. So you got to think about everything that you're doing, to include eating. You simply rip off, a package of some type of nutrition, and now that tab is floating, and you got to go catch it and float it. So it's like Velcro is your friend. There's Velcro all over the capsule, and you just kind of stick things. And hydration is challenging, and you're in that environment very similar to mountaineering, where you're not too excited to eat and drink. I was a little bit different. My crew members were not, eating and drinking, so I was eating all their food. I was training. Ironman, all we do is eat and drink. But drinking was very challenging. So you got a water bottle that's kind of pliable. Take a sip, but it creates this air pocket at the top of the bottle. So now you're just like getting air. So we figured out a way that the bottles that we had, it wasn't like these Capri Sun sippy cups that they used to have back in the NASA days. Ours was just a simple, very pliable water bottle. So we do this centrifugal force where we'd swing the bottle and the fluid would go to the end, the top, and you take a sip and you get more air pockets. So you constantly do this swing, drink. So eating and drinking was a bit of a challenge nonetheless for in space. You really had to think about it and get it done.
Again, I guess it kind of puts into perspective trying to stay hydrated in Hawaii and Kona, because you obviously raced that 4 times before. How did you find racing out in the heat of Hawaii at the World Champs?
I prefer the heat, although I have a tendency to push myself a little too far. That's, I'm amazed by taking 10 years off from the sport, where I was, now 12 years ago, to where we are as a community and all the resources available to us. You talk about like the power meters and the core sensors, and taking the internal core temps and doing the sweat tests and all this stuff to benefit the human body is awesome. Just the little bit of experience that I've had over the last year with precision fueling, and it just replaced everything that I used to do with something that truly works.
Yeah.
You know, I would, just to put it in perspective, I've done 17 Ironmans. I think there's one race where I've run the marathon completely in Hawaii. Otherwise, the other 16, I had to walk some portion because I hit that wall, because I have a tendency to push myself too far. I redline it and heart rate. And so now educating myself, working with, companies like Precision to figure out what my requirements are for carbs, fluid, and sodium requirements, and honing those in, and racing to the limit allows me to perform at a capacity that I never dreamed possible. I'm hitting times that I'm approaching my PR, and I'm 52 years old, and I've been doing the sport since I was 22 years old.
Fantastic.
So I'm excited for the future and continue to explore and learn.
Well, you shared your nutrition plan. It looks like you've got it pretty dialed in with like the numbers you're trying to hit, and
I'm trying to dial it in. Thanks to the resources that you guys provide and getting smarter.
Yeah.
Because it is a science for sure. And I think I'm getting there, and I'm training my body to absorb more of those carbs. And so hopefully I can get it to the point of
Would you be using electrolytes when you're in space? Because obviously they help you retain fluid and like.
I wish I'd met you guys before I went to space, because
start pre.
It hasn't quite made it down to those levels. We had kind of full reign to figure out what we wanted to bring to space. It just had to go through this whole approval process with going to vacuum, because we brought the entire capsule down to vacuum. And when you do that, we didn't have any fresh food, because, well, we did up until bringing the capsule to vacuum. But once you do that, it just ruins everything.
Yeah.
It's a very shelf-stable kind of substance.
Yeah.
So had I known about you guys, I would have tried to figure out how to incorporate some of these gels and electrolytes into the process, and I probably would have fared a lot better than we did.
Fantastic. And it sounds like you eating your crew members' food, it was just a big carb load ahead of Chattanooga was what space involved. With you said about you looking back sort of 12 years ago to your strategy now, how does your strategy compare to what you were doing then? Were you just drinking plain water and picking up, what was it, aid stations? Did you have a bit of a plan?
No, I did not have a plan. I would survive based on what was available. A basic concept of how many calories I thought I needed to consume, or how much my body would consume. It starts off with solid food, but eventually I, continued to push a little too hard. Now I'm getting nauseous and full, and that terrible feeling that you have when you eat too much sugar. And then it's survival once you get to the marathon. It was like anything that I could take in, and I'd get nauseous of that stuff, and then I'd always end up in the med tent afterwards, just pushing too hard and not eating the right things. And so thankfully now I've kind of learned what I need to take in. It's just a matter of fine tuning that and figure out what my body quantity wise needs. And it's an absolute game changer. Now doing a 5-6 hour ride on the trainer, no big deal. There's the residual fatigue that builds up, but the nauseousness and and the flavor, I love it. I can, for me, it's just simple gel mixed with water and the sachets, sachets or sachets,
packets in the US, I think, isn't it?
Mixing all of that together into the bottle is all I need. I don't have to think about it. Just consume my hourly consumption, and it's good to go.
Good to hear it. And final question, you touched on the fact you're like pushing towards your PRs now. What's the goal for Sunday here in Nice?
Oh, with this climbing, man, I wish my time in Italy had been more recent. It's been several years since I lived there with all the climbing of the Dolomites, so we'll see how I fare as long as I execute the plan. Egos have a tendency to get in the way. When that race starts, you feel great, and 250 watts, 260, I feel great, let's go. and then you pay for it come 80, 90 kilometers in. So to me, it's about just being conservative on that first climb. I'd be happy anywhere in the mid-10s for my age group at 52. Haven't quite tapered for this race with Ironman Arizona on the schedule in 2 months, with hopes of getting back to Kona. But I just love the sport. I'll be in it for the rest of my till working physical days that I can sustain the miles. But thanks to companies like Precision, I'll be able to forge on.
Excellent. Thanks, Scott. Thanks very much for your time, mate.
Absolutely.
Good luck for Sunday. Nice one. All right.